This upcoming September season of Marvel Snap comes with so many very interesting new cards. Let's take a look at all of the new cards from Marvel Snap's Robot season. On the season pass, Viv Vision received a late update, as you can see. This is a 3-2 that at the start of each turn will check to see if you are winning at the location that she is at. If you are winning, your entire hand gets +1/+1. If you are not winning, she will move to another location. And this is a very powerful ability gated behind a very hard to start snowball. But if you can start getting these procs, there are cards like Clea, Sebastian Shaw, and Braude that will really pay off once they can start snowballing downhill with these extra buffs. Of course, at 3-2, this is a card that naturally, people want to put their 3 costs in Surfer. But I do think that this card will benefit much more from a deck that is able to build for making sure that it triggers early. You don't need to be a Surfer deck. In fact, Surfer is quite bad at guaranteeing the early Viv trigger, but decks that are playing big 2s and big 1s, you could even imagine a world where people are playing Lizard and Hydra Bob just because of how strong this is once it starts rolling downhill. A card that I think is especially worth talking about with Viv is Clea, because one of the issues with targeting to make sure that this card is always going off is that you really don't want to be using your space too badly to make that happen. I think we've all been in situations where we've, in order to make an Iron Patriot happen, played Quicksilver Iron Patriot and then also a 3-drop. That leaves you very awkwardly positioned in terms of space, because if your opponent is able to force you to highly invest in that lane, they know what your remaining range is. And that is the kind of thing that I think you'd really want to avoid in Viv deck building, whereas Clea's skills are going to be able to add power to that lane in an effective way at a rate of 3 power for 1 energy, but are not going to take up space. And I think that is a very underrated aspect of the way this card is going to work. To me, this is also a card that a lot of games will be decided on if people are contesting the correct lane for the Viv. If you get a Viv in an uncontested lane, that's incredibly potent, because you'll immediately get that buff and then be able to reinforce that lane with Viv cards. This is a card that I can see being extremely relevant in the metagame. The only thing that would prevent it from doing so is its incredibly awkward stat line. And you can tell they're aware of this because, as you can see, they changed it from 3-3 to 3-2 very, very, very recently. So recently, in fact, that Snap.Fan, where I source these images from, hasn't even updated it yet. And this is a very notable change because her points of power are the biggest knob on the card. She's the most sensitive to that number of all the numbers you could reasonably change, probably, because I don't really think you could reasonably change energy, and I definitely don't think you could make her say +2 power to all the cards in your hand. But that does mean that if she is not able to get rolling, this snowball might not ever actually start. But if you get this snowball rolling, I find it hard to believe that this will not be a very relevant card. Good news for everyone but me, the Season Pass card will be available, the Super Season Pass card will be available for tokens entering Snap packs immediately upon release. The reason this is bad news for me is that this card absolutely terrifies me. Even after the rework of how Human Torch and Vulture work, this is still an incredibly scary number of power given to put on something that Human Torch can do. Human Torch is a card that scales with the amount of power it is able to acquire early in its scaling. The bigger it is when it starts doubling, the better that is. And while this will not happen on the first move from a Human Torch, because that's how counting works and that's how Sparky's ability works, it can happen early enough that the card will get unapproachably large, is how I would say. This card is so clearly a move card in the sense of a Vulture, Dagger, Human Torch card that it is almost to the exclusion of everything else move does. It will focus move on being a Vulture, Dagger, Human Torch deck to an incredible degree. The force multiplication you can get out of this kind of stuff is genuinely unbelievable. There are going to be probably 70 power Human Torches running around. This is going to be an extremely possible outcome, and the question will then become, how do we win the other lanes? Because, like, this is the kind of thing that if you have a Sparky on the board and you don't just do just a baseline Iron Fist Human Torch activate Sparky. Iron Fist Human Torch, Torch goes to 3. Sparky it up to 9, doubles to 18. Sorry, Torch goes to 6, I should say. But, like, that's just very easy 18 power for very minimal investment. And we're not even talking about the ways in which you can do things like, I don't know, Aranya. I don't know how ordering multiple activates that move works. I suspect it works in the order you activate them, so it should work. But, like, again, you're stacking these points on something that says double on it. Just a lot of really powerful final turn stuff looking like it'll be extremely possible in the move deck. A very clever design, if you think about what this card is actually doing. Bastion is turning your cards into Sentinels. That is, you get it? They're 2/3s. So there are two places that really stick out for Bastion to make a ton of sense. The first is in Cerebro 3, and the second is in Victoria Hand. That seems like a very straightforward, logical place for this card to go. I think it, at minimum, will be competing for spaces in there. We've seen Victoria Hand be a Moon Girl deck. I suspect Bastion might end up just being better than Moon Girl in that context. This is a very, very powerful card that I think is very, very easy to slot in decks that make a ton of sense for it. Unfortunately, it is pretty specific. Like, to me, the stat line on this card almost mandates that it be a synergy piece rather than the kind of good stuff card you'd see in a lot of different places, because it is so clearly geared toward repeating things that you have access to. Like, this is a card that goes in a style of deck that is very popular recently. You look at Victoria Hand, that's a very popular thing. I think maybe you could have argued this is like a Frigga in various Invisible Woman decks. Like, that kind of thing makes sense there too. Effectively, what this is doing is giving all of these decks access to like a Frigga-ish card without the stringent restrictions in terms of play timing that Frigga has. But, you know, if you're actually trying to copy something big, it's not going to be nearly as good. There are also some sort of fringy Iron Man type things that enter my brain when I think about this, like maybe the Ravonna Iron Man kind of deck that does something, Captain Carter's in the ongoing deck. There could be something there. Largely, though, this card does seem to be a synergy-based card rather than something that you're going to see everywhere. But once you have access to those synergies, it does seem like it should be pretty powerful. The other issue that this card has is the timing issue, though, because you need to have those synergies on the board. So it looks like it's the kind of thing that would multiply the effectiveness of your best draws, but when you're looking at, like, pretty awkward draws, you're not really going to love this guy. Weirdly, he seems like the kind of card that I might not like, because so much of your game plan is displayed so early that he might not have a lot of snap equity. This is a card that basically tells your opponent what your final turns are going to be and what some of the cards you're going to play are. So if they're not going to beat them, you would assume that they're probably going to leave. So there is that aspect of this card as well. Jim Hammond, Human Torch, looks to me like he's going to be in the same realm as like a Mad Thinker or maybe a Clea, although I think there's clearer synergy for Clea. I don't know exactly how I'm meant to go about getting enough max energy to make this card really, really good. Like, I can see being a Luna Snow Wiccan deck, but if I wanted to be a Luna Snow Wiccan deck, I don't want to be playing 1-drops that aren't Quicksilver, and I think that's kind of the thing I keep running into here. It's like, if I want to be that kind of deck that actually wants this guy, I don't want to be playing 1-drops that are like normal 1-drops. If this guy was like a 3/5 with this text, I think I'd be willing to have a much larger conversation about him, or like a 2/3 with this text. Again, I'd be willing to have a much larger conversation. 1-drops run into this problem, though, where it's like, okay, so you've done your 1-drop thing. That's awesome. You got your Mad Thinker to 1/8. You got your Jim Hammond to 1/8. Oh, sorry, Killmonger. Oh, sorry, Shadow King. And it keeps coming up when it comes to these cards because it has stopped them from ever being a relevant part of the metagame. The only scaling 1-drops that have ever been relevant are Kitty Pryde and Sunspot. Sunspot has only ever been relevant half in Chimera decks and half in Invisible Woman decks that just basically play it on the final turn of the game. Kitty Pryde dodges the fact that you people can interact with her by making it actually a very reasonable priority play to try to lose priority before actually playing Kitty Pryde. This is not an archetype of cards that has consistently been powerful, and I think it's fundamentally a design issue. There just aren't enough good numbers that they're allowed to put on 1-drops that would make them appealing. The reason Sunspot is popular is because you can very reasonably have him gain like 5 power. No other 1-drop is going to be able to gain like 5 power, and it makes him worth investing and protecting when you play things like Chimera, or in the world where you're playing Invisible Woman first steps and doubling and doubling. That kind of stuff is what a 1-drop needs to be good, and this is not that. I suppose there is one other direction that a 1-drop could take to be good, and it's just having a lot of value stapled onto it. There's been some really interesting directions in the form of destroy-ish decks, you know, Morgan Le Fay and Airwalker and Firelord, and none of them have really caught fire, if you'll pardon the pun. Moira X is another card in that vein, and I think this is a great top-down design. Moira X, of course, having the mutant power of resetting the timeline when she dies, makes this a very fun little nod to what she actually does. But I don't know if this is a good card or a bad card or what. Like, there's just so much variance here that on baseline, I can see, oh, draw a bunch of cards. That's probably pretty good. But drawing cards in Marvel Snap is usually good because they're cards you don't already have in hand. Like, the point of card draw in Marvel Snap is not the same as the point of card draw in other games. In other games, you use card draw and then trade 1-for-1 with your opponent's cards, and then you have more cards so you can run them out of cards and win by attrition. That concept doesn't exist in Marvel Snap. So I think this card is largely going to be like a Snap Equity, I got 2 of a really insane card kind of thing, or maybe like a Victoria Hand kind of card, where it's like, this is just gonna provide me the equity for a Victoria Hand, and that is going to just give me cards that I can do stuff with. We're already like considering destroying stuff with our Misery package as well. That seems like the kind of hybridization that I can do, but this is a lot of cards to add to your hand. So even in that world, I'm not sold 100% on it, but I'm really interested to see what some sort of like symbiote Victoria Hand deck could do with this. I don't know if they did this on purpose, but I'm assuming from the art that they did. Have you noticed how Omega Sentinel just really looks like Claw? I think that's just a very cute little nod. It seems like Claw too, right? Like this is just, oh, play this, it's like 4 energy Claw. That's effectively the use case here. And it doesn't have as many multipliers as Claw does, but Claw is very often played for value. It's sort of like a fringy, decent value card that you'll see sometime where it's just like, oh yeah, that's a pretty good guy. And I can see Jocasta doing something very, very powerful with Omega Sentinel. That seems to make a lot of sense to me. But largely, you have this card targeting the biggest card on the board and making it pretty much smaller. And I think that's really cool, although it is sort of priority based, because if you don't have priority with this card going into the final turn of the game and they play something bigger, you won't really know where it's going. And I think that specific bit of this card might be the awkward piece of it. But having a repeatable -7, like if you Jocasta this seems legitimately powerful. This feels like a solid Series 4 card that can make the building of the Activate deck, so to speak, more reasonable. It definitely does seem like Activate as a deck could have been construed as missing something like this, a solid multi-lane or single-lane winner if you want it to be. That kind of stuff is compelling. Like, this is effectively just another one of the 410s that they make, and it has similar comparisons, in my view, to something like a Cull Obsidian, which it's going to be very specifically good in certain spots, but not necessarily going to go in everything. I don't know why they seem addicted to making cards that are worse modes of Herbie. Like, we have Frankie Ray, who is effectively a worse mode of Herbie. And then we have Awesome Andy, who is effectively a worse mode of Herbie. And it's like, okay, I understand that maybe there need to be some activate cards that exist, but what I don't understand is why this can't be a 2/3. Like, I just don't understand that at all. This is like, yeah, okay, it's doing cool stuff, but it's an activate. I guess, you 2/3, oh my god, it's a 2/7. And it's like, I don't really find that to be a meaningful mode of analysis for 1 and 2 drops when you look at like what 1 and 2 drops actually are. It's like, oh, Athena, that's a 220, or it's a 210, or oh, Bruce Banner, that's a 212, but it's not, right? Like, these aren't actually what they are. And so I just find it hard to believe that this card was looked at and they were like, we can't make this a 2/3 or even a 2/2. It's got to be a 2/1. It feels low. That's just where I'm at on this. Danger as a 4/6 activate, destroy an enemy card here with less power. I kind of secretly think this card is quite good. I don't know if it's going to be as good as I kind of think it is, but there's just a lot of like reasonable when we talk about synergy decks, right? We're talking about decks that are trying to duplicate Invisible in First Steps, duplicate Cerebro, duplicate Victoria Hand. This card kills all of those cards. Like, it just actually does do that. And 4/6 might be just under par. But again, 4 is a pretty interesting cost because of Zabu, things of that nature, activate Jocasta, that kind of stuff. Like, there's stuff here that is compelling to me. Thing First Steps is not the greatest card in the world, but I think he'd be a lot better if he was 4, and I don't think his power is very relevant to how good he is. Like, the number on him is not the biggest reason why you do it. This card could play a similar role where, like, I kind of expect to see a decent amount of this. Like, maybe this is why they had to nerf Fenris Wolf. But, like, yeah, there's just kind of a lot of stuff like this. Like, you get Negasonic, you get this, you get Cannonball Mercury, which still exists. And it's just like, I kind of think there might be a reasonable deck where I'm just blowing up everything you play that has any kind of power at all. And I think that seems very, very possible and very, very scary to me. And again, 4/6, it's a little low, but I do think that the power of the ability is being pretty massively underrated. Like, this could play as a very, very powerful card. And if you get like Zabu and Surge on this kind of stuff, it's just like to me, this card is 1 point away from being like, I'm pretty sure this is a metagame staple. And the fact that it's only 1 point away from that means that it might be anyway. Super Adaptoid, 3/5 on reveal, steal the text from an activate card here. I mean, this is a 3/5 tech card. If activate's good, it'll stomp all over it. Pretty much that simple. What I wonder about is if that will make things that are activate abilities, like, will we want to be using them immediately, basically? Like, is the idea with an activate deck that you're just firing them off absolutely every single time so you don't get ruthlessly super adaptoided? This card's obviously good against the decks that can't do that, right? Like, if you're an Invisible in First Steps deck, this card is your actual nightmare. It puts you in the dumpster. You play this when they play the Prodigy, and you're just like, oh, dead, my bad, shouldn't have even tried, right? Like, that's the kind of stuff that this card seems really good at. But, like, I have questions about functionality here. Like, if a card has used its activate, does Jocasta, for example, still see it as having one? Would we be able to just, like, fire activates every single time and then still Jocasta it? Because if not, if you have to hold the activates, then suddenly this card is, like, way, way, way better against that kind of stuff. As is, it's just really flat good against a Bullseye deck, against an Invisible in First Steps deck, and we'll see how it interacts with Jocasta, because she's the next card we got to talk about. She kind of brings this whole season together, and I have a really, I think, important question about how she actually works that I don't know the answer to, and the answer will determine, I think, a lot of her power. Jocasta, as you can see, also received a very late balance change, 3/3 instead of 3/4, but what she does is immediately activate your other cards here without using their activate abilities. Now, that's powerful. But if they have to have activate abilities, like if you have to order this on the final turn of the game, i.e. activate Jocasta, then activate the other abilities, because if they don't have their abilities activatable, maybe she doesn't see them. Like, that's the thing I'm worried about. And the reason I'm worried about that is because the game isn't very good at flagging activate. One of the things that I think will probably crop up for a lot of people is if you activate Symbiote Spider-Man and he merges into another card that has an activate that you haven't used, Symbiote Spider-Man is still going to be like, oh, well, I used my activate, so their activate is gone too. And I wonder if Jocasta works in the same way, and I think that would be very bad for her given the play pattern I kind of just detailed. Like, you want to be able to play around something like a super adaptoid by using all your stuff as early as possible. And also the fact that Jocasta isn't activate, like, If this card was just like on reveal, do it, I think she'd be like a slam dunk guarantee. I really want to play this card. As is, I kind of wonder if this card is not like, all right, I don't know. Like, I kind of wonder about her functionality here. Last up is Warlock, who doubles the effectiveness of skipping energy. For each energy you don't spend, give a card in your hand -1 cost. I mean, this is the clearest She-Hulk Sunspot card of all time. That deck already gets absolutely demolished by Moon Girl, but this is by Mobius, the other M. And this card is just a clear push in that deck's direction. It is absolutely going to go in decks like that. That is an honestly powerful thing to be doing. And frankly, I do think that this card might be strong enough that we see a ton of Mobius in release week, because this card, with what it can do in a She-Hulk curve, having it be an activate is so meaningful, because She-Hulk's curves are so prescriptive. You want to be Moon Girling on 4, you want to be skipping on 5. Any deck where you're doing that, though, is like a reasonable space for this. High evolutionary, getting extra ability to play stuff alongside the big stuff in hand. All sorts of really powerful stuff potentially going on here. One interaction I do want to flag, though, is can it hit things that already cost 0? There are things that can do that in Marvel Snap and things that can't. I would like to think that it can't, but She-Hulk won't actually know that it costs 0 until the next turn, maybe? I'm really wondering about the specifics of that interaction. Basically, is it possible for me to waste procs here? Granted, this deck is already pretty good at getting things to 0. Like, it's got Black Swan in it some of the time. It's going to play a lot of cards on the final turn of the game, but honestly, this seems like a pretty powerful thing to be doing in anything that is willing to play a Sunspot. Like, there's some real upside to what this card is representing. I'm not saying Sunspot, She-Hulk, and Warlock become like a package in a bunch of things, but decks that were already in that space, I think are going to get a lot out of this guy. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I've been KMBest. You've been phenomenal. Let me know what you think of these cards in the comments below. I still read all of them. As usual, I will see you in the next one.